Appreciate it. My name is Stephen Molden, Head of Operations for Sun in Motion LLC, and I'll be your moderator today, diverting any questions that you have to our panelists and having our discussion. We have 6 panelists with us today, all from different parts of the sector, who will be discussing with you and addressing the impact of the cost increase in the supply chain and logistics in the MENA region for C&I and utility scale solar projects. The webinar will be a roundtable for around 30 minutes and a 15-minute Q&A with our spectators, panelists, and myself. So any questions you have, we can answer and to the best of our ability. We have 5 panelists today. Unfortunately, one of the panelists has became ill with COVID, so we wish him well wishes and a speedy recovery. We have Sumit Shekar, Senior Business Development Manager from EDF Renewables, who can't be with us. We have Dia from SunGrow. We have Marwan Al-Jaber, Sales Director from JA Solar. We have Torsten Nimps, Regional Director for Hellman Renewable Logistics. And we have Mr. Ashok Ramakrishna, Head of Business Development for Siraj Power. So guys, thank you all for joining us, and let's begin. At the first round of questions, I'm probably going to direct to the guys who work in the supply chain and try to work through in the format that we would on projects. So I think for the first question, Marwan, this will be for you. Obviously, we've seen a significant increase in modules at the moment, and it would be good to get your position on that and where we think the problem has occurred and why we're having such a cost increase in the modules.
Thanks, Stephen, for your kind introduction. And on behalf of JA Solar, I would like also to thank Mesia along with SunGrow as well as Solar Epic for organizing this event. Hope our audience will find valuable information from that. Going back to your question regarding the market and the fluctuation, please allow me right now to give a quick overview about our market structure, and I would like to emphasize that right now our market is classified into 2 sectors. One is the upstream companies, and the other one is the downstream companies. Upstream companies are the one who produce the raw material, polysilicon. Downstream companies, the one solar module manufacturers, inverter manufacturers, as well as the EPCs and developers. For us, to be honest, right now, we are already impacted from the price fluctuation in the market. And if we take a look at the prices from the beginning of the year until now, there was multiple round of fluctuations in the first half of the year. The reason for the fluctuation was because of the strong demand in the beginning of the year due to the postpone of most of the projects in 2020. And the other round of fluctuation, which happened in the beginning of October, was due to the shortage of electricity in China. Right now, based on the information that we have, that probably this issue will be solved, and probably we will be able, I would say, to see some reduction in polysilicon prices by after the winter time in China, because right now the demand is strong on the electricity, and during October, November, there was a couple of shutdown as well as reducing capacity from the major factories. One of them is the polysilicon suppliers. At the very end, this is the nature of our business. It's really a dynamic business, and because polysilicon is a commodity, whenever the price goes up or down, our module price will be revised accordingly. And as a module supplier, we don't buy the polysilicon for a full year from the beginning of the year. We lock the quantity. That's true. We lock the quantity, but we buy on a monthly basis. So whenever there is a fluctuation, in the polysilicon, definitely our price will be revised accordingly.
Of course. I mean, essentially, you operate as a stock market with the commodities. So any of those variables are completely out of your hands. So it's probably good for some of the listeners to know that you are also feeling the pain of some of the changes that have made in the industry recently, and it's as much in your control as it is ours. So thank you very much for that, Marwan. That clears up a lot. And it's nice to know that we have a potential track back to normality in Q1 of next year. I'm sure everyone will be happy to hear that. So thank you very much. I think that leads on nicely to Dia. Dia, obviously you're working with SunGrow at the moment. You have some nice new technology and capabilities entering the market. I think the one thing that we've seen quite stable this year is the inverter prices. Do you think you're going to be able to ride that wave, or is there going to be a slight cost increase? Are you going to be affected by this, or how do you think we can turn back to normality, and what effects can you see on the market? You're on mute, Dia. Just unmute.
Sorry. First of all, thank you guys for attending, and thanks for giving me the time to speak around this roundtable. Thanks for Misia, thanks for SolarAPIC for having such a platform, gathering the qualified people to contribute and to talk about their issues and the challenge which they are having. And thanks for you, Stefan, for having to moderate the session for today. So yeah, as Marwan was speaking, so it was actually it was affecting everyone in the industry. So when they were being affected in the solar modules, we are affected as a manufacturer for inverters, but not as the same as the effect which comes for the components for the PV modules, because they have more variant, more vital raw material which they are using, like the polysilicon, the wafers, the glass, the aluminium cables. But for us, it comes on the other side for the microchips, the thyristor, the semiconductors which we are using. It's actually connected to the global market, and the rates which is coming from the demand which is happening, especially the same components we are using, is not only the competitive components for the solar industry, because the same semiconductors and the same thyristors, same IGBTs which we are using, it can be involved in different many industries like automotive, electronics, and so many other things. So when we are seeing right now, there is like a high demand and low supply in terms of these semiconductors, which is definitely affecting the inverters and the inverter cost. But we are always trying to play on the long-term supply chain plans. We are trying to be different in a different partnership with more than one or two suppliers, just to make sure that we will be always having the most competitive price in terms of raw material, and on the other side that we will always have a supply. So our operation, our planning, R&D, they are working really hard to make sure that they are having this security for the material, but definitely it's an impact on the prices of the inverter today, and it's gonna be as well like impact as well for the next quarter if we didn't handle the issue in a proper way of planning. So that's why I was always calling for the developers, the consultant, the end users, just to make sure you are on the right time plan when you are doing a feasibility study for any of your projects, just to make sure that you will receive the accurate and competitive price, and on the other hand that you will be able to secure a material when times comes for a delivery.
No, I think you've some absolutely valid points. I think the one thing that probably gets missed is the timescales, as you pointed out. I know yourself and some other manufacturers across the sector have certainly tried to be proactive and get ahead of this. And I think if you didn't do that, we will be in a much worse scenario moving into Q1 and Q2. So thank you for that. So do you see for yourselves that you've not solved that issue, but to the best of your ability, stabilize that issue so that you will become, get back to normality quicker than maybe the solar module manufacturers?
See, it's all about the practice and the exercise which you will do it internally. Yeah. And this exercise will not be done, and it will not be valid and accurate without the inputs I'm getting from my EPCs, without the inputs I'm getting from my developers, the consultant. Based on that, we are moving, that we are having a weekly meeting or bi-weekly meeting just to make sure that we are securing the capacity, which is even with the hit rate of 70-80%, which is not yet qualified yet. So we work back to back with the factory to be able to solve it. But just to be honest and frankly, you cannot sort it 100%, especially it's day to day or it's a month to month demand in terms of the raw material. So what we are trying to do, just to be closer to the back office, that's be closer to the production line, to make sure that I'm giving you the right inputs for the deliveries, for the current situation of the supply chain. And from the other sides, I'm giving them heads that you need to secure these things to make sure that you will be able to supply when it comes to this time. So coming back to the question, we are saying we are working to solve it, but it will be a mutual understanding all the time of the situation, and the accurate inputs will make it better and better.
Perfect. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dian. Very clear, and great to know that the inverter market is trying to be proactive, which is going to help other people in the sector to also be proactive. Thank you very much. So I think that moves us on nicely to Shyam at Clenergize. Shyam obviously deals with all of the people involved in the sector. So he works with the developers, he works with the manufacturers and suppliers and EPCs. So Shyam, for you, I want to direct the question a little differently. So I'd like to know, what you're seeing, the impact on everyone at the moment, and if you think that there is a way to prevent similar situations. I know some of the variables are completely out of hand, but what can we do you think? Again, Shyam, you're on mute.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Stephen. And thank you all. So to be very honest, we've seen this, nobody predicted it. Everybody was riding on the low numbers of 2019, 2020. So a lot of studies and contracts were made on that front. And then we saw over the course of the last 1 year, a lot of these frame agreements being reneged on and a lot of contracts being renegotiated. So the effect is pretty evident. It's there for everybody. One thing that we understood is that the projects that were actually happening in terms of the capacity and the scale did not reduce drastically, at least for the CNI sector, because to be honest, the cost increase was pretty much in line with the 2017-18 numbers of solar, where 4- and 5-year paybacks were very much acceptable to end users. So basically, coming from the end user standpoint, I know we are all in the industry, so we all know the inside scoop of it, but when you're market facing and you're talking to end users, to them, there was a change. They didn't much care about it. They did feel the impact of it, but going back to the table and telling them that it is what it is now, and the future is not very well known with regards to pricing. So it's a wiser decision that you take it now than to postpone your PV projects. And we saw at least 90-95% of our clients proceed. Probably 1 or 2 held back because it was way beyond their budgeting. But from an end user standpoint, the project still went ahead because it's very simple. 2017-18 numbers were pretty much similar to what we have now. As far as hedging this issue goes, in future, when we launch tenders, so we do about 50-60 tenders a year in the CNI market here in the region. A very evident lesson learned is try to have some provisional sums, some safety buffers, and try to build those in your feasibility reports with a very healthy margin so that the end user has that in their mind that the solar market is very volatile, and it is the way it is. So they have to accept it. To have any standardization in a technology platform that's moving so aggressively would be very novice. That doesn't really apply to our industry. So it's our job when we sit with these end users at the decision-making table to ensure that there is a understanding of what may happen. So we've done that in our tenders, and the ones coming ahead will be easier on the contractors and developers, where they're not really bound by these 90-day, 100-day validity periods for their offers. They'll have to comply with what the upstream industry is throwing at us. So that's our take on the matter.
No, it's good. It's good to hear, Shyam. Obviously, the offtaker plays a very significant role in what we do at the moment. I mean, personally, I think that some of the offtakers' expectations are quite high at the moment with regards to their savings, etc. And obviously, the way to combat that is to try and not levelize this, but as you say, give a buffer so that the next round is an easier pill to swallow.
Right.
To keep the momentum. So thank you very much for that, Shyam. Ashok, I think obviously you are one of the leading developers here with a portfolio of projects and delivering some nice C&I projects across the region. How has this affected you, and when do you think this is going to stabilize, and what do you think the future impact is going to be across the region?
Thank you, Stephen, fellow panelists and the audience. To bring a developer's perspective into this discussion, basically, if you see, we have a long sales cycle. Sometimes it can go over a year, even 2 years. While in terms of execution, what we do is normally in a quarter or two, we try to finish the project. So when this price volatility creeps in, it becomes difficult giving visibility to the client that this is the level at which we are going to install the system, and after that, it holds good for the next 15, 20 years. So this has been quite challenging from the developer perspective, mainly driven by the fact that the component prices have been varying so much, and we have not been able to really fully pass it on to the client, because obviously, like as Shyam mentioned, there will be a pushback from a client if he is not budgeted for this level. So this turbulent period has been a balancing act from our end. We've been trying to work with the supply chain, the partners, to see how best to tie down the prices, while at the same time working with clients and trying to give them a good deal, which we can continue for the next 15, 20 years. So from a developer perspective, yeah, it's definitely been a challenging period. We are not really seeing an immediate a relaxation in this scenario. So we do expect that next 2-3 quarters, this pain will continue. And the idea is, try to see how best we can come through this period.
I'm sure it's as you said, a turbulent time at the moment. Obviously, everyone's expectations are quite pessimistic at the moment because it doesn't seem to be coming to an end. I think obviously we've had some positive indications from Marwan and Dia with regards to potential stabilization earlier than thought. So let's hope that happens. I mean, one other question I would say, Ashok, is there anything that you would say is doable with regards to collaboration with all of the various members of the sectors to see what we can do to try and negate some of these issues in the short term to enable us to get to the long term still in one piece?
Yeah, what we've been doing is some of our major cost elements like the modules, inverters and all, we generally work with a 1-year time frame. So normally there's a framework in place, but then what has happened is the market conditions have forced our partners also to increase the pricing. So what we are looking at is continuing the framework concept because we have a fairly good visibility of what will happen and next year what we are going to do. But the pricing is on a more shorter time frame. So what we're doing is, like you said, basically working with our partners to see how best to collaborate with them and keep prices in control. Because ultimately, if you see the client is looking for the best deal and it's a competitive market. So here the idea is try to work with the partners and see how best to work with them to keep the market still going steady.
Yeah, I think as you say, it's such a storm at the moment. It's very tough to be proactive. I think it's very reactive at the moment, and communication across the parties is probably key at this point to try and limit the damages or the problems that we're going to face moving forward, which is good to know that everybody is considering that across all of the parts of the sector. So obviously, one part of the saving, what we thought would be a saving rate, would be bringing Torsten in, is the logistics part. Obviously, we are seeing sort of a stabilization here in the numbers of COVID. And everybody would expect that we would start seeing a bit of normality in the logistics and shipping part of things. But obviously further afield, we're still continuing with problems and we're not seeing a decrease in the rates of containers, etc. So Torsten, can you just talk us through how that's affected you guys and is the return to normality as quick as we think or maybe a bit longer?
Yes, Stephen. Yeah, Thank you for the question and thanks for having me. Yeah, it's very difficult, right? In general for the market. On the one hand, we have the rising cost in raw materials. On the other hand, due to COVID, we have seen an uptick in demand for global shipping, right? Just due to the fact that people are not moving around as much. People are sitting more at home and consuming goods, and therefore there's a huge increase in shipping goods from Asia around the world, basically. Yeah. Then we had issues like the Suez Canal with the Ever Given and port closures due to COVID. This all has shaken up the global shipping dynamics a lot, and there's still a very high demand, and prices are still on a very high level. Yeah, for example, looking from Far East, China to the Middle East, shipping prices have almost tripled from pre-COVID levels to where we are now. Yeah, there's still a high demand for shipping. We have issues with equipment availability, meaning the containers are hard to get a hold of, and all this is impacting the pricing and also the availability and the schedule reliability. Yeah. Where you were able to plan something very well before the pandemic, now it's very difficult to make sure that your product actually arrives in time when you need it. Yeah? And this trend looks like it's going on at least until Q3, Q4 of 2022. Yeah. Unfortunately, not good news that I can tell you, hey, everything's going to be back to normal, but this is kind of the reality that we're facing.
No, and I think obviously the whole precipice of this call was to bring some transparency to everyone who's listening and to maybe help them to be reactive to be proactive rather than reactive. So obviously, you hit on something there that's probably not really taken into consideration. Everyone's very, very, very blinkered into we are the only market globally because we're solar professionals. But you made a valid point that obviously the whole of the globe is ordering online and is consuming at a much higher level from virtually than the shopping outlets and malls. So that's something to think about, I think, for everyone else. I think there's probably a couple of questions that just so everyone knows as well, guys, everyone who's spectating, there's a Q&A section. I see a lot of people are diverting some questions to the general chat, but if you can direct them to the Q&A, the guys at the end and I will answer as best we can through there. So please direct your questions to the Q&A piece. And I mean, Torsten, this is a tough question, but because nobody could have ever foreseen this happen in the pandemic, etc. But is there anything that the shipping and logistics sector would do differently to prevent similar situations from happening, or is that just it's impossible?
I think it's hard to say at this point because we're still in the middle of it, right? Once things are kind of get back to normal, there might be a post-mortem where, we're going to look at, what are the measures that we could do in order to, avoid something like that. On the other hand, I think there's so many different factors coming in together. It's pretty difficult to say, hey, this is the plan that we can take in order to avoid all that, because there's just so many things coming together at the same time.
Torsten, thank you very much. So obviously, we from everyone that's spoken and added to this, It seems that we have a sort of not a pessimistic outlook on it, but a realistic outlook that it's going to take some time to stabilize, and it's not going to go as we would hope. And Q1 will be, fantastic, and everyone will be back to normal. So this one's to Shyam. Shyam, do you think obviously that is going to have an effect on future bids within the region? And do you think obviously we have, some of the Chinese cell and wafer manufacturers calling force majeure? Do you think that's going to affect the amount of megawatts and gigawatts delivered across the region with what we know now?
We're seeing it in the larger projects. You cross anything in excess of probably 10, 15 megawatts of capacity, especially the ground mount ones and semi-utility ones. Those are definitely hit because the numbers there go in the decimals. But if you're talking about the average CNI rooftop market here, again, I'm telling you from general experience, you sit with the end users here, they don't really want to know about our sad story in the industry. They are happy with the KPIs they were getting before, and they can be made to be happy to accept the KPIs that they're getting now. So if you know it well, Stephen, when you sit in with the execs, with the end users, they'll have a pushback. There'll be a little bad taste about the price going up in the renegotiation of the contract, but the contract goes ahead.
Yes.
So yes, it's slightly harder to push the case for solar now. It was very easy when you're in the 2.5 year to 3 year paybacks. Now you're in the 3 to 3.5 year paybacks, touching 4 probably, but not a big issue because we did it 2-3 years back. But yes, when we're looking at the numbers for say our 25 mega, 30, 40 mega in those range, even another 50 mega that we're doing recently, the expectation on the LCOE was really low, unable to match it now, hoping that we can give them better numbers in Q1, Q2.
Okay. Yeah, so I completely agree. I think obviously from an EPC perspective, obviously what's happening now is the moment that you stabilize a price to give the offtaker what they need, we're having another increase in price, which is obviously damaging or affecting the EPC's margins essentially, and it's becoming harder and harder to stabilize without making a lost project. So I think, it's a domino effect, and it's a cascade that everybody, if it keeps continuing to rise, I think people are going to feel a squeeze a little bit more, and we may have a difference in perspective from the off-takers, because the conversations are going to be a lot harder to have. So Ashok, I think that rolls perfectly over to yourself. Obviously Shyam sits at a level where he deals with a lot of the EPCs, a lot of the developers and the suppliers. You're there at the forefront of the developers. Are you seeing any projects that you may look at delaying or that may fall off and you might have a reduction in megawatts this year? Or are you still sort of positive and reacting well to the changing situation?
We are quite positive because actually we have seen that the market has picked up in the C&I segment, especially when the PPA or OPEX or the leasing model is there, because it's virtually a no-brainer that the client doesn't have to invest anything and he's getting a saving on his fuel bills. So we focus mostly on that market. So we, in terms of actually projects signed, we've had one of our best years, and we expect this trend to continue. But like I said, the expectations set by previous years where we were able to offer a much lower tariff, that probably cannot happen now. So what is being done is, sort of moderating the expectations of client, that the supply chain challenges have, sort of not giving them as big savings as they would have expected. But otherwise, we are feeling that this market will keep on growing at this rate. So that way we are optimistic. It's only a question of, balancing out the costs so that, the deal becomes more palatable for end users.
Good to know. Good to know. And I think obviously the recent piece with DEWA, where they've managed to levelize the AC to DC ratio on design, that probably helps align everybody in the market to give a similar offer, and then the bids are more straightforward. So that I know people look at that as a reduction in size, but I actually see that as a positive piece. Would you agree?
Yeah, what happens is that earlier DEWA was allowing a higher DC to AC ratio, but then internally after their R&D team examined it, they felt it's better to stick to this 1.2 DC to AC ratio. And I think now the whole industry is aligning to that. So all fresh approvals are with that. So yeah, it does sort of start limiting the size of the system. So it has a small impact on the market as such, because the total megawatt installed does come down on a plot. But then I think everybody has already aligned to it, because here what happens is you have the rules which are very specific to the region. that on a plot, it can only be generated for that plot, and then there's a sizing limitation also. So if it continues, I think most people are comfortable, and some of the bigger clients who have bigger rooftops, if they miss out, I think they are reconciled to that.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, everyone. It's very, very eye-opening, actually, to hear all of those views on this matter. And we have some very positive points. We have some worrying points. But I think as a market and as professionals, everybody is on the same page that we want to keep this market sustainable. We want to move it forward, and we're willing to collaborate and be proactive to do this. Dia and Marwan, obviously, maybe the final question, because Ashok's just and myself have just hit on the AC to DC ratio point. Has that changed anything for you at the moment, Dia and Marwan, with regards to your orders and the way some of the EPCs or developers have reacted? Because obviously previously some of the inverter manufacturers and the module manufacturers are happy to see a higher AC to DC ratio, 1.3, 1.4, and signed off on that technically, and there's been no issue. Has that changed anything for you, dear, at the moment?
For our side, it doesn't change much more. Maybe it will change more from the D side, because at the end our capacity is the same, especially that's for the new technologies of the inverters that can carry even more. So going to the low limits or going to the higher limits of the AC-DC ratio, impacting of the lowest voltage and higher current modules is existing today, connected to the inverter, it doesn't really make an impact on us. I mean, in terms of inverter, but at the same time, that we are always trying to support what will give the optimum results from the project. That's not to be exceeding or not to be below. So at the end, it will not make the proper feasibility or the levelized cost of energy needed from this project. So we give our recommendation to the regulatory. We speak to them. That's where will be the break-even points or will be the proper limitation which they can reach. That's all that's happening by education and communication, definitely between the stakeholders and regulators.
Perfect. And Marwan, obviously for you, it seems that for Dia it still remains stable because of the inverter's capabilities. But for you, obviously, I would even though the remaining true to the current applications for systems, the future systems are all 1.2. And obviously, as Ashok hit on earlier, the sales cycle is quite long. So have you had people coming back and changing orders and amending the values for some of their orders due to this? Or again, is it stable?
Well, honestly speaking, it was stable up until Q3 this year. Probably the maximum hit happened in the price fluctuation done in Q4. And we have seen some of the projects were like either postponed or delayed a couple months. But like in terms of like the DC side versus AC side, I believe probably at this stage for us, we have like some more room to ship more modules in the market. But at the very end, right now, our EPCs and developers are trying to compensate the difference, because at the issue over here is with the shipping cost, so they can utilize the full load container, which is something already considered from our clients right now. Instead of just taking the exact quantity, probably they can increase the quantity a little bit in order to optimize the shipping cost and have a full load container to avoid paying like shipping costs for the partial shipment or so on. So definitely it doesn't affect like that much or from our side, because still like we are talking about small figures over here. But I would say, yeah, whenever it goes like DC size bigger, probably yes, it's like good for us as a module supplier, because we are providing DC side.
Perfect. Okay. I think obviously that brings us to our Q&A part of the webinar. So we have a few questions within the chat, and we have some questions within the Q&A section. We have one from Fatima, where she's essentially saying that this is a webinar. It's not a lecture. Can we get some PowerPoints? Obviously, Fatima, what we will try to do after this call, we wanted this to be a roundtable event so that you could hear from all of the different members of various parts of the sector, their opinions and their outlook. Obviously, there's a lot of data out there at the moment, but it's ever changing. So we wanted to be live and give you some information that is of right now. I'm sure all of the panelists, including myself and Messier, can help put something out. So we'll try our best to put something out on a more data-driven scale after this. So thank you for that. Obviously, there's another question which was, I think, directed to Shyam. I think he answered that in the chat section, which was regards to the similarities between the 2017 and 18 costs, and is there any publicly available index that they can refer to for the cost of panels and/or PV systems? Have a little Shyam. I don't know if you want to have a bit of a response to that one live, so that everyone can maybe you can direct them to where they can find that information, or you can give them where that information has come from.
Sure. So basically, this year's information probably will be compiled by early next quarter when they can get that idea. So panel indices will be very easily available. They can take a look on TUV DNV studies, which will come out, and you will probably see them early next year. But panel price, the entire project price, very rarely do you see any studies coming out on the turnkey EPC price as such. That's why I had to put it out as the numbers are there from our own assessments with about 100 plus tenders that we've run, 130. I think the numbers are there within our teams. Obviously, we can't share them, but you'll have to take our opinion on face value that the EPC price is a clear reflection of what was there 2 years back.
Sure. I think just to add to that also is if the listeners go to the LME, so the London Metal Exchange website, you can clearly see aluminium costs, steel costs, and copper costs related to solar projects, and any other commodities. So you can see the trend from that date, 2017, 2016, to the current date, which is quite mind blowing, to be honest. It's exponential. We also have a question, maybe this one's for Ashok, which is what are we seeing now as the current sort of dollar cents per watt rate, per kilowatt per megawatt at the moment, previous to what we've seen in the last couple of years before COVID?
I mean, just to give a ballpark figure, because it depends on the specific project, but over a megawatt, probably you could say half the DEWA rate, so that means around $6 to $8 tariff is there in the market. And I think depending on the project size, the portfolio, the creditworthiness of the client, but definitely half the DEWA tariff is now available in the market in Dubai.
Cool. Thank you very much. And we have another question, which is just coming in now through the social media platform. So give me 1 second. This is a question to Dia. One of the guys is asking, shall they expect a raise in inverter spare parts as well as the inverters in 2022? And is there an indicative dollar cents per watt rate that you think that may go up?
For the Q1, so far it's gonna be like stable at the Q4 and Q3 of the last year. What is gonna happen after Q1, we will be announcing soon. In terms of the inverter or the conversion material, we had already an increment for the batteries, which is almost like a 20%. So, but for the inverters, it's gonna be stable the next quarter. So if there is any change, we are always keeping our clients, our partners, everyone as ahead. We are just giving the insight and impacts is an early stage. So, but so far for the Q1, we are okay. We are stabilized for the inverter so far. For the rates, that's it's a variant because we are as a Sangro, we have a different range of residential CNI utility. So that person is asking, like, feel free to drop me an email, then I can share with you the price and which level, which size, because it's a big price list. So you just can communicate with us directly and we will support.
Perfect. So obviously Monif is directing these questions to me, so I'll have him maybe share your email address to the person that asked. We also have another question, which is a little bit non-topic related, but it probably will come in the next round of questions. And this is for Ashok. It's what would you say, Ashok, is the next big C&I market in the GCC that won't be affected by this?
It's a bit difficult. In our assessment, we felt Saudi Arabia was sort of starting to align with the regulations coming out. So we feel that's why we have started working in Saudi. In the Northern Emirates, we do feel that if the regulations come in place, it could open up. And then after that, Oman. So this is our thinking presently.
Okay. And with, this is a question for me in response to what you've just said. With Saudi, as it's quite incentivized for its energy, do you think obviously the rise in costs you will still be able to give the offers that the kingdom would want to see at a C&I level, or do you think that's going to happen?
It's a challenge because you have both the 18 hawalas as well as the 30 hawalas. At 30 hawalas, you can offer some savings to the clients, but 18, it doesn't work out right now. So we are assuming that Saudi will gradually start phasing out some of the subsidies, and then hopefully that market can offer a lot of potential.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And then we have one question. There's been an announcement from Israel over the last couple of days, which is with regards to, and this is an open question to everybody, so feel free to weigh in. What is your opinion on the latest tender announcements in Israel with a 0.0271 per kilowatt hour tariff for 300 megawatts plus solar plus 200 megawatt hours BESS? In this current situation, how can such a tariff be offered in the current market? Would anyone like to weigh in on that? I have my answer.
Sumit may have been better placed to answer that, but in C&I, definitely it's double that tariff. Huh?
I think maybe I'll take that one, Thomas. Simply, I think it's going to be quite hard to achieve that. I think maybe they're trying to drive a big outlook on this, but I honestly think that is a tough cookie to crack at that level. So if anyone can do it, please give us the information, because we'd like to as well. So Marwan, there's a question for you also, which is with regards to the stabilization of the costs from the module manufacturers. Do you think you've reached your peak now, or do you still think there's room for an inflation on the modules, or are we coming into a stabilization period? And the second part of that question is, are these dollar cents rates the new normal, or are they going to go back to the original rates?
Well, honestly, Stephen, right now, it's really hard to predict what's going to happen next week, let alone if we are talking about next year prices. Again, polysilicon is a commodity. Every day it has a prices. As I mentioned early in our discussion, probably there was an issue with the power shortage in China in October 2 months ago. This issue will be solved, definitely will be solved. But how much this will affect the polysilicon prices, that's what we are waiting to see, and how it will impact the polysilicon prices. That's probably the first part of the question. The second part of your question was about the inflation. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, so it was obviously, we know that there's a potential for this to rise. It was more about, do you think that this is the peak, and are we going to ever go back to the lower levels of module costs, or is this the new normal?
Well, honestly speaking, the polysilicon prices today has reached the prices that have never reached before since 2011. 2011, the market was I remember in 2011, our annual capacity for JA Solar was in a range of 2 giga annual capacity. Today, we are targeting more than 30 giga this year. So, the price has reached a level where no one was expecting it. But Is it going to go to increase further? That's something probably no one is able to answer this question, honestly
Probably
speaking.
no one wants to answer that question either. So Marwan, there was one question that just came in, which was, is there a way to get into like a circular economy, for instance, to try and consider companies like JA Solar opening a local branch and manufacturing locally to try and help that? Is that even a consideration at that point?
Well, this is right now is the hot topic right now in Middle East region. And honestly speaking, the issue over here, we have to look at it from like different angles. The first one is like having an assembly line in the region means that we have to have the BOM material in the local market. Are the BOM material are produced in the local market? We're talking about like junction boxes, cables, tempered glass frame. Are they these BOM material are available in the local market? If they are available in the local market, what kind of protection mechanism the local government will provide for the supplier to open a factory in the region? Because if you will ended up by importing all the material along with the cells to one of the local markets here in Middle East, definitely with the current shipping cost, definitely the module price will be higher than the one we are producing in China. Because in China, for example, there is like more than 100 companies producing just only the junction boxes. But the question over how many companies are producing junction boxes in the region. So it's really complicated, but the moment that we see some sort of protection mechanism provided by the local government, definitely we will consider to have a factory in the region.
Perfect. Thank you, Marwan. We have another question for Shyam. Shyam, someone asking, what is the impact of the current situation on the payback period / IRR of projects in the UAE and the region in general?
Payback periods were at their best when we were in the mid-50s in terms of the EPC pricing. So payback periods were around 2 years, 8 months, about 540 for certain projects. Now we're touching around 650, 670 in certain cases, best case even 630s basically. So payback periods have jumped by about 4 to 5 months. So within 3 years, 4 months, 3 years, 5 months, IRR has been slashed by about 4 to 5%. So that's where we are presently.
Perfect. And we have one other question, and I think maybe a few people will want to weigh in on this, including myself. Ravi Jani has asked, what is the opinion of solar PV fraternity about the intermittency of this technology, and how critical would storage technologies such as CHP and large-scale batteries be the long-term success of PV to offer flexibility of the grid and help drive net zero emission projects defined by various policymakers? So essentially, could CSP and battery storage be the saving grace that we all need? And how likely is it to be? Anyone want to weigh in?
I think, Stephen, we hear a lot about this. Every time there's an entirely new or different or large-scale technology to be applied, the government steps in and they need to step in. We're talking about a grid, which is an integrated grid. At a local level for industries and end users, you can talk about your net neutral, carbon neutral, net zero policies to achieve that. The only advent that you have, or the access you have, is a rooftop solar plant at the max. Or in countries where there's wheeling permitted, you can have a setup somewhere far off and then pay transmission distribution charges. But the moment you start talking about CSP, battery, BESS systems on a nationwide scale or even a district-wide scale, the government has to step in, and they come with their own rules and regulations. So like with any other technology, I think solar is like a bridging technology. It's the bridge between what's going to be the permanent long-term solution and what's really not working now with the hydrocarbon-based solution. So the solar is the bridge between what was there and what's due to come in. And it's not that it will go away. It'll only, support the long-term solution, because it is something that will feed into the long-term solution. So everybody's trying and testing, but till the government doesn't have the say on the matter and doesn't have policies in place, one can't really envisage these district or country level net zero solutions being put to scale.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, for me, Ravi, I would love to see the integration of battery energy storage systems being, a hybrid system with solar PV and relieving diesel generators and potentially moving into that next generation of renewable energy. I think at the moment, though, pricing plays a massive part on the BESS side of things. It's hard to make a project work when you integrate batteries into a solar project. The IRRs and the return just become really hard to swallow for the off-takers and the end users. And not only that, from an infrastructure point of view, the likes of DWA, CWA, FIWA, they're not equipped just yet for that new technology because their grids are quite stable. Generally, the BESS is brought in for grids that are unstabilized and are saturated, and they use them behind the meter. So I would say that it's probably going to be a little bit further off than we would like here. But globally, I think it's going to take off in countries that have grid resilience issues. But the price has to come back to earth because the commodities that affect the batteries, they're soaring as well. So I hope that answers your question. So I think, guys, we've probably come to the end of our time. I think it was a great call. I think it's been very informative for everybody who has joined in. Messier will be putting out the next report in January, and I'm sure the guys on the call will also be active on social media to put out some reports following this call. Big thank you to Sungrow for sponsoring this and enabling this to happen. So thank you all very much for your time, and we hope to see you again soon to discuss more of these matters.
Thank you guys. Thank you, Steve. Thanks, Hisham, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. See you soon.
Thanks, Tasha.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you everyone who watched and listened. Hope it was informative. Thank you very much.